Okay, let's dive into this because, there's this very specific, almost cinematic moment that happens when you build wealth. It's that moment you walk into your bank and the teller stops calling you sir or ma'am just out of some corporate policy and suddenly starts calling you by your actual first name out of genuine interest, right? You're literally the exact same person. You have the exact same haircut, the same wrinkled shirt. Heck, you even did the same terrible parallel parking job out front. But the only thing that changed is a number on a screen, a number they can see and that you can definitely feel. Here's the thing nobody tells you about building wealth. The money itself, it's actually kind of boring. What is truly wild is watching the world just completely rearrange itself around you as you cross certain invisible lines. So, in this explainer, we're going to look at exactly where those lines are drawing.
But before we map out those levels, we absolutely have to fix a completely broken mental map that causes so much unnecessary financial anxiety for us. Just think about these numbers for a second. Frankly, this should genuinely bother you. The average American household net worth is roughly $1,063,700. Sounds amazing, right? But the median, meaning the exact middle point, where half of all families have less and half have more, is about $192,900. Wait, process those two numbers again in your head. The average is literally more than 5 times higher than the median. So how is that even mathematically possible? Well, it's because a tiny, tiny group at the very, very top of the financial food chain is so absurdly wealthy that they yank the entire average upward. Think of it like a kid hanging off a curtain rod, just pulling the whole thing totally out of whack. So, when you read a headline that says, the average American has over $1 million, your brain immediately goes, well, I'm clearly failing. But you aren't. Most people are nowhere near $1 million. Honestly, most people are one transmission failure away from a very, very bad month. The average is just a fairy tale, and the median is the actual story. So now that we know where the real baseline is, let's take a look at our map for this journey. First, we'll hit level 1, the 100K snowball. Then we'll move up to level 2, the millionaire mirage. After that, we climb to level 3, freedom money. And finally, we'll confront the trap of enough.
All right, starting right off with level 1, the 100K snowball, also known as the hardest level to beat.
This is the very first line you cross where things genuinely start to shift. And it happens at a number that's going to sound almost insultingly small once you see what it actually does behind the scenes. $100,000. Look, I know $100,000 isn't buying you a yacht. In some cities today, it's barely a down payment on a decent house. But there is a really profound reason why Charlie Munger, who is one of the sharpest financial minds who ever lived, explicitly singled this number out. He basically said, the first $100,000 is a bitch, but you gotta do it. I don't care what you have to do. If it means walking everywhere and not eating anything that wasn't purchased with a coupon, find a way to get your hands on $100,000. Now, why would a billionaire obsess over a number that to him is just a rounding error? Well, it's because of what happens after you hit it.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is that it reveals the secret mechanic that flips the game entirely in your favor. Your money doubles on a set schedule, and that schedule only depends on your rate of return, not how much money you already have to begin with. This math shortcut is called the rule of 72. You just take the number 72, divide it by your annual return, and boom, that tells you roughly how many years it'll take your money to completely double.
So if we assume a standard 7% long-term market return after inflation, your money doubles about every 10 years. But here is where the math gets slightly cruel. That 10-year timeline, it is identical whether you have $100 or $100 million. The percentage is the same, the effort is the same. But think about the output. $100,000 at 7% earns you about $7,000 in a year. I mean, that's a decent used car maybe. But $1 million at that exact same 7% earns about $70,000 a year. That's literally more than the median American makes at a full-time job, and it's for doing absolutely nothing. The early grind is incredibly slow. Just because your snowball is so small, it feels like pushing a car uphill in the pouring rain. But once you finally get that 100K snowball packed, things really start to change. Hitting this mark in liquid savings quietly drops you out of the most financially fragile group in the country, that massive chunk of households living paycheck to paycheck. And let me tell you, the institutions absolutely notice. This is the exact level where a bank like Bank of America actually starts changing your pricing. You suddenly unlock better credit card rewards, discounts on your auto loans, maybe even some money knocked off a mortgage. Now, nobody's throwing you a parade, and they certainly aren't rolling out the red carpet for you just yet, but you've essentially unlocked a slightly nicer waiting room. Compounding has officially flipped from working against you to working for you.
Which brings us to level 2, the millionaire mirage, redefining the $1 million mark. And this brilliantly illustrates our next reality check. This level is where the total opposite of being ignored by the bank becomes your new default setting. But we need a serious reality check on what $1 million actually means in the modern world. It is definitely not the number your grandparents think it is. Thanks to inflation moving the goalposts, $1 million back in 1990 actually has the buying power of about $2.5 million today. So, when your parents talk about millionaires like they were gods walking the earth, they aren't crazy. In their dollars, a millionaire really was rich. Today, though, if you use the famous 4% rule for retirement withdrawals, $1 million generates about $40,000 a year forever. Now, that's incredibly comfortable. You never have to panic about a surprise car repair ever again. But you are certainly not flying on private jets or lighting cigars with $100 bills. However, socially and institutionally, this is exactly where the VIP treatment starts. Banks actually assign you a dedicated human being. Annoying fees are just waved away like they were never even real.
But the real perk of level 2 is access to entirely new strategies. Walk with me through this undeniable math from JP Morgan because it will completely rewire how you understand wealth. Ready? The rich don't get rich and then spend their money. They get rich and borrow against their money. It's called the securities-backed line of credit. Let's say you have a $10 million portfolio and you need $3 million in cash. If you sell that stock, which is the standard move, you immediately trigger taxes, you stop your compounding cold, and your remaining $7 million grows into about $483,000 of gains. Not bad, right? But what if you borrow that $3 million against your portfolio instead? Well, your full $10 million stays invested. It grows into $690,000. So even after paying $58,000 in loan interest, you still come out $148,000 ahead. That is 31% more money.
So the crucial point is this bizarre reality. The system is literally designed to reward people who already have money by making life cheaper for them. Think about it. You get lower interest rates, you avoid taxes by borrowing instead of selling, and you get to spend your savings without actually spending your savings. It's basically financial Schrodinger's cat. The system has a VIP lane, and the toll to enter it is simply having so much money that you don't actually need the lane at all.
Next up is level 3 freedom money, the $5 million threshold, and the monsters that come with it.
This kicks in somewhere between $5 and $10 million. And let me tell you, it changes the psychological landscape completely. First of all, the math. $5 million at that 4% withdrawal rate we talked about generates about $200,000 a year without you lifting a single finger. At this point, work is instantly and permanently optional. This is also where the velvet ropes of high finance truly open up for you. Look at these insane entrance fees. JP Morgan's Real Private Bank wants a minimum of $10 million in investable assets just to talk to you. Goldman Sachs's private wealth arm has a median client account of $55 million. And then there are these ultra-tier family offices built solely for people worth $200 million and up. To put that in perspective, only about 1.6% of American households even crack the 10 million mark. At this level, you are quite literally a statistical rounding error, but, in the best possible way.
But we absolutely have to talk about the monsters at level 3. Because the gurus posing next to rented Lamborghinis on the internet, they will never mention this part. Getting a massive pile of money quickly triggers an actual, recognized clinical condition called sudden wealth syndrome. You get overwhelmed by intense guilt, extreme paranoia, and deep isolation. And the absolute second word gets out, relatives you haven't spoken to in years emerge from the woodwork with these can't-miss vending machine opportunities. It is so destabilizing that a huge study of thousands of Florida lottery winners actually found that sudden wealth didn't save people from bankruptcy, it just delayed it. Dropping a massive pile of money onto a life that simply wasn't built to hold it means it usually just leaks right out the bottom.
And then there is the resentment. Psychologists call it the crab bucket mentality. Basically, if you put a bunch of crabs in a bucket, any crab that tries to climb out gets instinctively dragged right back down by the others. Well, people do this too. The moment you visibly start winning, folks close to you might unconsciously try to pull you back, just because your rise highlights the fact that they're standing still. It's a really lonely paradox, where the exact same wealth that earns you intense respect from total strangers can completely cost you the freedom to trust the people who actually knew you before you had it.
Let's move to and see how this builds into our final section, the trap of enough. Why the game is rigged to make you play forever.
You would think that somewhere up this ladder, there is a step clearly marked enough where you can finally just sit down and exhale. Well, there isn't. The game is rigged to make you play forever. Think about the moving goalposts for a second. Charles Schwab surveys Americans every single year on what net worth makes a person wealthy, and the number just keeps sprinting away from you.
Recently, it was around $2.5 million. Here is the ultimate trap. The person with 1 million looks up at the person with 2.5 million and feels poor. The person with 2.5 million looks at the person with 10 million and feels poor. Your brain naturally adjusts to every single new level in about a month, and then it quietly and relentlessly demands the next one.
So the people who actually win this game aren't the ones who climb the fastest. They're the ones who decide on purpose what enough means for them, before the moving goalposts decide it for them. You can cross every single one of these financial lines and still be utterly miserable, or you can intentionally build a life that strangers, bankers, and crabs in a bucket can't ever touch. The whole point of understanding these invisible levels in this explainer isn't to feel like you are falling behind. It's to see the machine for exactly what it is and realize that you get to pick your own finish line. So I'm going to leave you with this one question to think about. What is your enough? And when you finally reach it, will you have the radical courage to actually stop